In the stillness of Mass, everyone stood waiting for communion. The priest moved slowly down the aisle, offering the host. But when he reached a young woman with tattoos visible on her arms, he stopped. His gaze went cold, and in a firm voice he said, "You won't receive communion today." Silence swallowed the church. Her face flushed, her hands trembled, her heart hammered. Eyes turned toward her, as if she were a mistake. Why did he do that? She'd never even spoken to him. What could possibly justify such public humiliation? What came next was even more painful, and would change her life forever. Comment: is this fair? What would you do? I didn't get tattoos to defy anyone. I got them so I wouldn't forget who I am when memory tries to betray me. The swallow on my wrist was the first. My mother used to say those birds always find their way home, no matter the distance. The olive branch on my forearm came when my father fell ill, a quiet prayer for gentler days. And there's a tiny verse, almost hidden along my ribs, that only God and I know. None of them is a shout, they're whispers. And for a long time I believed whispers bother no one. That Sunday I woke earlier than usual. I washed my face and stood in front of the mirror for a few seconds, as if I were trying to read myself before stepping into the world. It'll be fine, I told my reflection, even though nothing special was planned. I had promised myself to receive communion more often, step by step, like relearning to walk after an old fall. My neighborhood church is small, with wooden pews that creak when you sit and stained glass whose colors look like childhood candy. I've always liked the silence before Mass, the kind that isn't empty, it's waiting. I took my place on the third pew on the left, like always. I'm a creature of habit. Third pew, a small notebook in my bag, coins for the offertory. I thumbed through the missalette and tried to follow the psalm in my head, but thoughts drifted. Work, the rent, visiting my aunt, the cake I promised to bring to the team gathering. At some point I noticed two older ladies whispering 2 rows ahead. I didn't assume it was about me. People comment on everything, the altar cloth color, the chill creeping in. I smiled a little, a gesture no one saw. When the homily began, I took a long breath. I like paying attention to words, even when I disagree or my mind wanders. He spoke of dignity, of what we carry within and what we show without. It grazed me for a second, maybe because those words always find me, but everything seemed ordinary. No explicit accusation hung in the air, and I'm not the center of the world. I stayed there, sure this Mass would be like so many others, discreet, quiet, necessary. At the sign of peace, I shook hands with the woman beside me. She squeezed my hand gently and smiled with porcelain teeth. "Peace," I answered. "Peace." It's amazing how 2 simple words can sometimes put the heart back in place. I felt less alone. For an instant I saw my mother again, fixing my fringe before catechism class and saying, "You don't have to speak pretty. Speak with your heart." I've always spoken with my heart, even if, on the outside, I tattooed memories so I wouldn't lose them. The communion line formed, slow as a trail of ants. I joined, head bowed, hands together. I tried to think of nothing but the simple rhythm: walk, receive, give thanks. The floor beneath my feet beat like a metronome for something that's accompanied me since childhood. The voices around me were a murmur of other people's prayers. Blue light poured through a window like calm water. As I neared the altar, a hollow opened in my stomach I couldn't explain. Maybe it was just nerves. I always get a little anxious at that moment, as if my whole body knows something sacred is happening. That's when he looked at me. Not like you look when you recognize a face, but like someone measuring a wall to decide where a picture should hang. A gaze that doesn't receive, it evaluates. I fixed my eyes on the paten, breathed, and took another step. I did not expect what came next. No one expects to be refused in front of everyone when what you extend aren't arguments, but your hands. I felt the blood drain from my face. The people behind me shifted half a step to the side, like unwilling witnesses to something they didn't want to see and couldn't look away from. The ceiling fan's buzz swelled, mocking my effort to stay upright. I trembled. Not because I felt guilty, but because shame has a body and a weight. I went back to my place with empty, burning hands. I didn't cry. At least not there. I sat, eyes fixed on a random spot on the floor, trying to decipher how an act of faith could turn into public humiliation in a single second. My head repeated, "Calm, breathe, don't make a scene." And I didn't. I never do. When Mass ended, I waited a bit. People trickled out, life resuming its ordinary pace. A woman touched my shoulder. "Don't mind him, dear. You know how he is." I didn't. I wanted to. I went to the side door where the priest usually greets parishioners. He stood there with two extraordinary ministers, smiling at some, shaking others' hands. When I approached, I'd already rehearsed a simple, respectful, almost childlike line. "Father, may I speak with you a moment?" He looked at me as if I'd interrupted something important, and maybe I had, in his mind. "Not now, daughter. Come by the office during the week." The word daughter hurt. On another day, it might have sounded sweet. That day it reminded me he saw me as small. I stepped into the courtyard and sat on a concrete bench under the mango tree. Children sprinted and laughed, and I tried to remember how easy it once was to laugh like that. I pulled out my phone because that's what we do when we don't know what to do with our hands. In the dark screen, I caught my reflection, wet eyes, tight mouth, the shock of disbelief. I surprised myself muttering an apology inside my head, as if I'd trespassed where I didn't belong. Why? For existing, for wearing ink on my skin, for wanting to live my faith without hurting anyone. On my way home, I passed the bakery where I always buy pão de queijo on Sundays. The smell usually comforts me. That time it turned my stomach. At home, I left my shoes at the door, washed my face, and sat on the living room floor. It felt like the only stable place. My cat, Bento, came to rub against me and meowed, insistent. I half laughed, a wet laugh. "Hey, Bento." I sat breathing in counts, 4 seconds in, 4 to hold, 4 to release. I tried to remember what dignity is and what appearances are. I tried to remember that God isn't small. I repeated like a mantra, God isn't small. Memories rolled in like waves. My first communion, in that plain white dress my mother sewed at home, needle between her lips, patience in her hands. The shine in her eyes when she watched me return to the pew, holding a prayer like a secret. My father crying softly in the corner on confirmation day. In every one of those memories, no one looked at me like a walking offense. In all of them, faith was a bridge, not a fence. By afternoon, anger arrived, timid at first, then with determined steps. I don't usually explode. I collect myself, analyze, try to understand, but there was a small fire in my belly saying, "This isn't fair." Right behind it came guilt, an old companion. Guilt for feeling hurt, for not having endured it quietly, for imagining I could have avoided it with longer sleeves, a jacket. Guilt is clever. It disguises itself as prudence. I opened my laptop and began searching. I'm no expert, but I needed an anchor to remind me I wasn't losing my mind. I read texts, catechetical notes, parish forums, conflicting opinions. Some insisted tattoos are vanity, others expression. I saw priests explaining what matters is the heart. Others took a stricter line. The internet is a world of voices. Amid them a sentence calmed me, not because it was final, but because it felt human. The sacrament is medicine and food for sinners, not a prize for the perfect. I recognized myself, a sinner in need. I'm not seeking a trophy, I'm seeking sustenance. While I read, a message from my friend Anna popped up. "Are you okay?" I heard rumors after Mass. I explained in a few words, because explaining too much is exhausting. She asked if she could come over. I said yes. Anna arrived with a lemon tart and attentive eyes. She sat, took my hand, and listened without interrupting. Sometimes that's all we need. Not someone to fix it, someone to stay. When I finished, she breathed out, "I'm so sorry. What do you want to do?" I didn't know. I wanted to go back and change jackets. I wanted not to care. I wanted to stop trembling at the memory. Instead, I said, "I want to understand why." Monday, Still with a knot in my throat, I went to the parish office like he'd said. The hallway smelled of paper and coffee. The secretary, a woman with round glasses, was kind. "He can see you after 4, okay?" I waited. At 4:25 they called me in. A simple crucifix on the wall, shelves of books. He sat there, neutral-faced. I said, "Good afternoon." He nodded. "Father, I want to understand what happened yesterday." My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. "Daughter, the Eucharist demands dignity," he replied, fingers interlaced on the desk. "There are external signs that confuse. Better to avoid scandal." Scandal. The word struck. I wanted to ask whether the scandal was me or his refusal. I wanted to ask since when memories on an arm become a stumbling block. He spoke in a bureaucratic tone, like someone reciting a rule book without opening it. I told him my tattoos are memorials, that I wasn't there to provoke anyone, that I come to Mass because I desire it, not to show off. He listened with measured patience. Finally, he said, "Try to practice discretion, and out of prudence, avoid approaching communion until we can provide deeper guidance. We can schedule some spiritual direction." I left feeling politely diminished. No shouting, no explicit accusation. Just a polished varnish from someone who believed he was protecting the sacred from me. By the door, I ran into Donna Teresa, the same lady who'd wished me the peace of Christ. She hugged me like someone who knows without knowing. "Sometimes he's too rigid, dear. Don't take it personally." I smiled sideways. How could I not, I thought. The body is personal. I got home more tired than on my hardest workdays. I lay down, but sleep didn't come. Every detail ran loops in my head. The stained glass, the smell of wood, the weight of his gaze, the word scandal dripping into my ear like a stubborn leak. At some point I sat up and closed my eyes. I didn't want injury to fester into resentment. Resentment is acid that corrodes from within. I whispered like a prayer, "Lord, I don't want to hate. Show me where to step." Tuesday over coffee my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. "Hi, I'm Lucas, an extraordinary minister of the Eucharist. Can we talk?" I think there was a misunderstanding. The quotation marks bothered me and at the same time lit a spark. "Sure. When?" he suggested after the choir rehearsal that evening. I agreed. I spent the day in a state of waiting. At work, I filled spreadsheets with my head someplace else. At noon, Anna sent me a voice note saying she was praying for me, and I smiled at the sound of her voice, as if friendship were a sacrament too. At 7, I pulled on a long-sleeved top by reflex, then changed into short sleeves by decision. I wasn't willing to barter my skin as a ticket for acceptance. At the church, the choir was tuning. Music filled the rehearsal hall in a way that washed the soul. I waited in the corridor, that familiar scent of candle wax recalling promises. Lucas appeared with a notebook and a look that blended goodwill and caution. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I spoke with Father. He thinks certain expressions might confuse the younger ones. You know, there are lots of new people in the parish." I listened, breathing. "My tattoos are memory. What's confusing about that?" He scratched his neck, uneasy. "Some symbols can be misread. A swallow and an olive branch?" I asked, calm. He lowered his eyes. "Not everyone understands." "I do," I said, "and God does." Lucas sighed like someone carrying a weight that isn't his. "Maybe you could talk to him again. Share your testimony. Tell the story behind your tattoos. Sometimes he just doesn't know." The idea of testifying pierced me, gentle and thorny. Part of me thought, why should I justify my skin? Another part remembered, not everyone sees what I see. I said I'd think about it. He thanked me, and before leaving whispered, "I'm sorry about Sunday." On the way home, the night breeze blew away some of the dust that had settled on these days. The choir's music kept vibrating inside me. I considered telling the story of my tattoos. I considered not telling it. I weighed what scandal means when the heart is disposed. I thought about dignity and modesty, about form and content. And for the first time since Sunday, I felt a spark of courage that wasn't just anger. It was the desire to remain, not out of stubbornness, but out of love. At home, I made tea and opened my small notebook. I wrote, I am not a poster, I am someone. Beneath it, I wrote the story of each drawing. I wrote as if to a friend who doesn't know me, without armor, without ornament. Maybe I'd give it to the priest, maybe not. Writing put my hands back in place. Just as I closed the notebook, my phone buzzed again. A notification from a parish group I keep muted. Pastoral da Comunicação. Someone had posted photos from Sunday's Mass. I scrolled almost on autopilot until my eyes snagged. A shot from behind of the communion line, with me in the center, recognizable by the drawing on my arm. The caption read, "Let's guard reverence. God sees the heart, but we also witness with the body." Prayer hand emojis, comments, example, no modesty, young people need direction. My chest chilled and burned at once. My hands went numb for a second, as if they didn't belong to me. I reread the caption, each word a nail I never agreed to carry. It wasn't just the refusal at the altar anymore. It was the record, the caption, the judgment shared as catechesis. The floor tilted beneath me. I closed my eyes and swallowed. The image didn't say my name, but I knew it was me. And those who knew me would know too. Then I knew, painfully, clearly, this wouldn't erase itself. It wasn't just between him and me in the communion aisle. The humiliation had become content, and like any content, it would echo. I breathed in, counted to 4, and opened my notebook again. I wrote one line, "I will not disappear." Now, man, I understood my first conversation wouldn't be a timid explanation. It would be a firm request. Take the post down, issue a public apology, not to me alone, to the community, for using a person as an example without consent, and commit to never turning anyone's body into illustrated catechesis. I closed the notebook with steady hands. Bento leapt into my lap as if confirming an invisible decision. I stroked him, and for the first time since that Sunday, felt myself standing on the inside. The story behind my tattoos would no longer be a whisper kept only for me. If they wanted to talk about my body in the language of reverence, they would have to listen to me too. The morning after the post, I took a full breath and typed a simple message in the parish communications group. "Good morning, please remove the photo where I appear in the communion line. The caption exposes me and suggests something untrue. I'm counting on your understanding. Send." My palms were sweaty, as if 2 short sentences required the courage of a speech. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted my body to stop being the window display for an example I never consented to be. 2 hours later, a reply appeared, signed by someone I barely knew. "Peace and good. The photo doesn't identify anyone. The goal was catechetical. We'll consult the pastor." The word catechetical slid through me like a cold ruler. I counted to 4 and wrote again. "For those who know me, the image does identify me. The caption shamed me. I ask again that you take it down." Blue check marks. Then a stone silence. The next notifications weren't for me. Prayer hand stickers, choir reminders, retreat invites. The business as usual noise of parish life. Life went on. For everyone but me. By Wednesday afternoon, the photo was still there. More amen, more great example, more comments about modesty, reverence, witnessing with the body. My name wasn't printed, but my outline was. I caught myself thinking, if a billboard used my back and everyone who knows me could tell it was me, wouldn't that still be exposure? The line between public and intimate is sometimes as thin as skin, and mine was rubbing against wire. On Sunday, I decided to go back to Mass. Not to provoke, because I needed to. Part of me wanted to vanish, to find a different parish, a different city, a different country. Another part told me, soft but stubborn, remain. I put on the same short-sleeved blouse from Tuesday. In the mirror, I touched the swallow, touched the olive branch. "You came this far with me. You're coming now, too." The homily started gentle and grew ridges. We live in a time when signs on the body try to speak what the heart hasn't learned. Modesty isn't censorship, it's charity. As shepherds, we must protect the little ones from scandal. He didn't say tattoo, he didn't need to. A mother in front tugged at her son's sleeve. 2 rows behind me. He's talking about her. My chest tightened. The pew creaked like it wanted me to shrink. I stayed. Staying felt like holding my own dignity between my teeth. When communion began, my legs were heavy. If I went, he could repeat the gesture. If I didn't, someone would say, "See, she knows." I stayed seated, fingers laced as if clutching a rope. I didn't pray pretty, I just endured. Afterward, I stood and walked out, feeling cold lamps of glances on my skin. In the courtyard, some people greeted me kindly, others looked away. Donna Teresa hugged me long. "He meant you, didn't he?" I closed my eyes a second. "He meant all of us, I think," I said, short to keep from crying. On Monday, I went back to the office. Hall, coffee smell, wait. "Father, about the photo." He tilted his head, patient. "Daughter, it's a formation piece. No one identified you." I explained again. The caption, the comments, the effect on me. He took a breath like preparing a ruling. "If you don't want to cause confusion, cover the tattoos. We can't legitimize anything that might scandalize. Charity includes modesty." I swallowed. "And my charity? The charity of not being used as a warning sign without my consent?" He said nothing for a beat. "I'll ask the communications team to review the wording." I wanted to ask whether people who open the wound should be the ones to measure it. I didn't. I left tasting the bitterness of begging for ordinary respect. That night, Lucas texted, "We got the caption removed, photo stays." I opened the group. The words were gone, replaced by a generic verse about the body as temple of the spirit. Relief and anger crashed into each other inside me. Removing the caption, hid the nail, and left the cross. "Thanks for trying," I replied. He sent a voice note. "I'm with you truly, but there's pressure. Catechism parents, some from the council. They think you provoke. I told them you're just existing. Not everyone understands just existing." Hearing his voice gave me a little ground. "Thank you for remembering that existing isn't provocation." At work, the jokes started. A co-worker who also attends our parish walked by and murmured, "Hard to receive the Lord with all that graffiti, huh?" I half smiled because it was that, or bite. At lunch, 2 colleagues chatted about the case of a tattooed girl who wanted to be trendy at church. I stirred my rice and thought, I am a case. Case is a tiny box that shrinks any life. I finished, washed my container, and opened a spreadsheet to be something, anything, other than hallway gossip. Midweek, the social ministry coordinator called. I usually helped with food collection on Saturdays. "Hi, how are you? Listen, for now it's better if you take a little break. The atmosphere's sensitive, you know, a lot of chatter. We'll wait for things to calm down." I breathed. I signed up to carry boxes, not judgments, I thought. Aloud I said only, "I understand." She sighed. "I'm sorry, it's not personal." It was deeply personal. The next Sunday, he was more explicit. Not enough for a formal complaint, enough to cut. "There are fashions that tattoo the skin and blur the soul. Out of charity, we sometimes must correct." Heads turned toward me like obedient compass needles. I sat in the same third pew. My heart pounded, but my body didn't retreat. After Mass, before I reached the door, a catechist approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, would you be willing to give a testimony to the teens about choices and consequences? We could show that God welcomes everyone, but there are better paths." I understood. I would be the before picture for a after pamphlet. "Thanks, but no." She widened her smile. "Think about it with love." I left, carrying an echo. They were thinking of me with didactics, not with love. I started logging everything. Dates, phrases, reactions. Not out of a love for archives, out of storm instinct. Writing kept me from losing myself. One night I drafted a long letter to the parish council. I described the refusal at communion, the photo, the messages, the conversations. I asked for 3 simple things. Take the image down for good. Issue a public apology, not just to me, to the community, for using a person as an example without consent, and commit to never turning bodies into illustrated catechesis. I sent it by email, dropped a copy at the office. I'd have sent smoke signals if I could. The council meeting would be Thursday. Lucas whispered I might be allowed 5 minutes. I wrote, rehearsed, cut adjectives, kept verbs. I wasn't going to fight. I wanted to carry my body into that word everyone was throwing around without looking at me. Prudence. That afternoon, an email arrived from the office. We inform you that Assembly members cannot address the PPC per the bylaws. Your letter will be read by the coordination. For a second, my chair vanished. Efficient, polite, I would be subject, not voice. I went anyway. I sat at the back, legs restless. Reports about the festival, roof repairs, retreat schedules. When they reached communications and catechesis, the coordinator read parts of my letter, the way you hold porcelain you don't plan to buy. After each paragraph came a prepared on the other hand. On the other hand, the community has a right to formation. On the other hand, scandal. On the other hand, prudence. I wanted to stand and say, and on this hand, mine. I couldn't. In the end, they voted to keep the photo for 1 more week, pending further guidance. It felt like they stamped an expiration date on my shame. Outside, an older council member approached. White hair, cologne, gentle voice. My child, don't hurt yourself. Father carries a heavy burden. Sometimes he decides out of zeal. I looked at his hands, slightly trembling. I carry a heavy burden too, sir. He smiled, sad. I know. His kindness opened a narrow window in me. There is goodness, I thought, but sometimes goodness is too timid when faced with zeal. The following Sunday, the homily ratcheted up again. Those who love, correct. Those who receive correction with humility, grow. He spoke of obedience, of listening to the shepherd's voice. I don't doubt the importance of obedience. I learned that young, but correction without listening becomes imposition. When communion began, I stood. My heart beat like a trapped bird, but I was steady. He saw me. I saw him see me. I took my place before him, hands extended, the gesture I'd learned as a child. He took 1 second longer than usual, long enough for a world to fall, and whispered, "Not now. Seek spiritual direction." It wasn't loud, but the silence around us made it sound mic'd. "I already have," I whispered back. He shook his head almost imperceptibly. The host did not come. I stepped back, then back again, and returned to my pew. The wood groaned as if it knew my name. After Mass, 3 teens surrounded me, curious eyes, a shy touch of insolence. "Miss, is it a sin to have a tattoo?" I smiled without showing teeth. "It's a sin to wound people while thinking you're saving them." They glanced at each other, unsure whether I was stern or poetic. "Pray for me," I said. "We will," they answered, and sprinted off before Sunday ran out. A gentle ache passed through me. Maybe one of them would want a drawing someday, not for fashion, for memory. That week, the parish bulletin ran a piece titled, "The Body as Temple, Signs of Belonging and Prudence." It bore a council member's signature, but the cadence felt like Father's. In the middle was the silhouette of a woman from behind, tattoo on her forearm, walking through church. A drawing, not a photo, but a tracing of a photo I knew too well. Under it, concrete examples help form consciences. Example, concrete. I inhaled. The air stopped halfway. I could have given up, changed parishes, gone quiet, but every misused prudence pushed me forward. An anonymous Instagram message arrived. I saw what they did. Don't give up. Some of us disagree. I cried onto the keyboard for the first time out of anger and relief at once. "Thank you for seeing," I wrote back. That afternoon, I wrote to the diocesan curia, described what was happening, attached screenshots, dates, snippets. An auto-reply came. "Your message has been received. Cold, but received." I held that like a receipt for being real. In the parish group, the photo finally fell. In its place, flowers and a verse about not judging by appearances. It sounded like an apology without admitting fault. In the comments, a timid sticker debate. Prayer hands, hearts, golden amens. Someone wrote, "So sensitive." Another, "Respect matters." I closed the app before I dissolved in that carnival of opinions. That evening, Lucas called. "It's down, But Father wants to meet with you and the team. He says you all need to understand each other. I sighed. I didn't pick a fight. I know, he said, but he believes you provoke without noticing. I laughed without humor. My forearm provokes. What power? Saturday, I went to the parish hall for the meeting. Father was there, along with the communications lead, 2 catechists, and Lucas. I sat and placed my notebook on the table like an ID card. Father began. Daughter, I know you're hurt, but you must understand we have a community. Young people, children. We must form. I spoke about forming without exposing, caring without humiliating. I told them I existed here before the tattoos and would exist after. I'm not a controversy. I'm a person. The coordinators search for a middle ground. What if we do this? You keep participating, but avoid receiving at the busiest masses. Or wear a light scarf. It's elegant, you know. I looked at the olive branch, at the swallow. You want to hide me, so I won't be a stumbling block. But the stumbling block isn't on my arm, it's in how it's looked at. Father cleared his throat. Let's not fall into relativism. Some signs do confuse. Until this is resolved, I ask you to refrain from public communion. If you'd like, we can arrange a reserved time, private communion. He said it kindly. Kindness doesn't dissolve violence, it perfumes it. Private communion? I repeated without raising my voice. Shared bread in secret so the people scandalized by a drawing won't be scandalized. No one answered. Lucas fiddled with his notebook's spiral, searching for a door between lines. I braced myself on the words I'd written in mine. I won't accept a sacrament hidden away. I won't hide my arm, and I won't be quiet. The silence that followed carried fear, pride, and a crack. I left the hall with trembling legs and a new certainty. Next Mass would not be the same. I went home and prayed in my own way without formula, asking for less anger and more bravery. Sunday, I sat in the third pew like always. The homily spoke of inconvenient testimonies and obeying even when we don't understand. I didn't know if he was talking about me or himself. When the communion line started moving, I stood. My breathing was a contained tide. I advanced one step at a time with the composure you invent when there's no other option. 2 people ahead of me, someone whispered my name like a warning. A catechist came at an angle and low said, "He asked that you wait in the pew. You'll talk after." I looked at her, calm and steady. "I'll wait here, in line." She sighed and returned to her place. When my turn came, he raised the host above me, the way you hold a frame to judge a height, and said loud enough to travel, "Not now." The words fell like a cracked bell. For a moment no one breathed, me neither. There, between Peyton and hands, between stained glass and stairs, something shifted, not a scream, not a scene, the line that snaps when it's been pulled too far. I returned to the pew but didn't sit. I stood with my hands on the backrest and looked at him. I didn't speak with my mouth. I spoke with my posture. I will not disappear. People felt it. A murmur spread like a fine rain. After Mass, instead of walking out to the courtyard, I went to the sacristy. I paused at the door, asked permission, and stepped in. He was taking off his chasuble. I spoke quietly, each syllable weighted. "Next Sunday I'll be back, and I will ask again in front of the community why." He looked at me serious. "Because I'm the shepherd." The word struck me. I breathed. "And I am a sheep. But I am not an object." I left with my whole body awake. The corridor smelled like wax and decision. I knew that in the week ahead, either I would crack, or the silence enclosing us finally would. The week before the next Sunday felt like walking a tightrope strung between 2 rooftops. Each morning I repeated, "No hatred, be brave." Each night, "No spectacle, be true." On paper, those lines looked neat. Inside me, they were a braid barely holding. Anna dropped by twice with coffee and silence. Lucas sent short messages that sounded like someone carrying too many words in too small a pocket. "I'm praying. I'm here. Don't disappear." I replied with small hearts, and the only sentence that kept me human. "I don't want to win. I just don't want to vanish." On Thursday, an email from the Curia. "Your message has been forwarded to the Episcopal Vicar for review." cold, bureaucratic, impersonal, and still a crack where light might get in. I printed it and tucked it into the folder with my letter to the parish council, screenshots of the post, and the notes where I'd transcribed phrases that fell on me like hard rain. Not because I wanted to turn faith into a lawsuit, but because I was there, needs paper when it wasn't that bad starts to spread. Friday, I half-worked. Cells and formulas stared back at me like empty rooms. In the afternoon, Anna suggested we walk. The park was full of trees that know more about patience than most people. "Are you sure you'll go on Sunday?" she asked, fingers wrapped around mine like a lifeline. "Yes," I said. "I don't want to fight. I want to ask." She nodded, and the nod felt like a blessing. Saturday I cooked. Garlic, simmer, timing, ancient ways to convince a heart to remember the world's rhythm. Sunday broke a pencil crayon blue. I pulled on a simple blouse, left the tattoos visible without flaunting them, and touched each one as if fingering a private rosary. The swallow, the olive branch, the hidden verse. "I can be afraid and still stay," I told my reflection. I slid the folder under my arm. Not as a banner, as an anchor. I arrived early. The nave was cool. The floor still held the damp of a fresh mop. Candle wax and old wood, the smell that's lived in my lungs since childhood, softened my pulse. I took my usual spot, third pew on the left. Blue light from the window pooled on the aisle like a shallow lake. When I opened my eyes, I caught Lucas 2 rows ahead. He turned the tiniest bit, saw me, and gave a small nod that said, "I'm here." I folded that nod and put it in my pocket. The entrance hymn lifted us. For a minute I forgot the tightrope. Liturgy has a way of laying down steps you've walked 1,000 times, even when your legs are shaky. Then the homily. He adjusted his stole and drew the sort of breath adults take before giving a child bad news. "There are corrections that hurt," he began, "but they save." I waited for the old trio, scandal, prudence, protecting the little ones. And there they were, not naming me but outlining me. We live in a time where outward signs compete with the reverence due to God. It is the shepherd's duty to protect. Protect what? I thought. Not the faith, its image. Hide me to guard the holy, and in the hiding, scratch the holiness of recognizing a person. When the communion line stood up like a tide, the floor tilted under my shoes. I stood too. My heart beat up in my throat. My hands clasped themselves. One step, then another, and with each step I whispered to my bones, no yelling, clarity. People moved in the hush of prayer. When my turn came, he looked at me, not as if he'd found me, but as if he were measuring me. I didn't step back. I lifted my hands. He held the host 1 second longer than usual, long enough for a world to fall. "Not now," he said. "Seek guidance first." Heat climbed from my stomach to my eyes. I could have turned, sat, swallowed the shame, and let the current drag me back into the pew like driftwood. Something in me, call it dignity, kept me upright. The music kept playing somewhere far away, as if the melody had been pushed to the back wall. I lowered my hands a fraction, a sign of respect, and asked loud enough for him and perhaps 2 rows. "Why?" He frowned, the way people do when asked to reveal a secret in the wrong room. "Because communion requires prudence, daughter. Some signs confuse and scandalize. I've come each Sunday," I said, keeping my voice even. "I spoke with you, with the office, with the team. I told you what these drawings mean to me. I've heard prudence many times. I tried to be respectful even while it burned. I am asking before God and this community, what is in me, what is mine, that makes me unworthy of the bread that has always been remedy and food?" No one shouted. The church opened like a crack you only notice when the water level drops. A few heads turned, others lowered. A throat cleared in the back. From the right aisle, Donna Teresa traced a slow sign of the cross, as if signing a prayer she couldn't say out loud. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lucas shift a small step closer to the altar. "It's not personal," he said, settling into the tone of rulemaking. "It's for the community, to avoid confusion. It's for charity." Charity snapped inside me. I could have unfurled pages and paragraphs. I could have cried. Tears persuade better than reasons. But I didn't want pity. I didn't want to win. I wanted to be treated like a person. Charity without listening is just an order, I said, and though the words trembled inside, outside they held. The community gets confused when a person is turned into a poster without her consent. Behind me, someone murmured, "Let it go, girl." A steadier voice off to the side, older, cut the air like a blade sliding through bread crust. "Father, with respect, please don't humiliate her." It wasn't a shout. It was adult pleading. He glanced toward the voice, maybe Donna Teresa, maybe another, and wavered a fraction, like a man feeling the floor shift. Then he straightened. "Brothers and sisters, please, silence. This is a sacred moment." The silence returned, but with new color. It saw. I knew anything I said would be weighed, measured, passed along in corridors and group chats and bulletins. I spoke anyway. Silence is also a word, especially when your silence is the tool they need to keep going. "I don't want to divide," I said. "I don't want to challenge you. I don't want my skin to become a banner. I'm asking you not to treat it like a threat. If you believe I need guidance, I'll receive it. But refusing me in front of everyone, then using me as an example, that doesn't educate. It exposes." He placed the host back down and intertwined his fingers, the gesture that turns a conversation into a decision. "For prudence and obedience, return to your pew. After Mass, we can talk in the sacristy. I heard after the way I've learned to hear it in churches and offices and clean, polite rooms. Never. How many doors have been locked with that soft key?" Before I could answer, Lucas spoke, voice quick and respectful, but firm from the altar's side. "Father, permission. As a minister, as a brother. Just this. Let correction not be humiliation. The community is watching. We can welcome and guide without denying the bread in front of everyone." His face tightened. "Defense, not rage. Lucas, we'll discuss it after." People were frozen like statues that breathe. The world had shrunk to a little aisle. Me, his hand, the paten, Lucas's eyes, the blue window staining the floor. My knees wobbled. I steadied myself with my fingertips on the back of the pew. "I'll go back to my place," I said at last. "Not because I agree, because I won't tear the assembly in two. Next Sunday I'll return. Until then, I ask you to consider whether this correction is truly charity." I didn't wait for his reply. I stepped back, 1, 2, and stood at my pew with my hands resting on the top rail, breathing like someone who has just lifted a heavy box and doesn't want to drop it. I didn't pray words. I let breathing be the prayer. People filed past. Some looked at me sideways. Others looked through me. A couple of hands touched my shoulder like a candle being snuffed gently. After Mass, I stayed seated until the last Amen thinned into the stone floor. Then I walked to the side door, where he usually greets people, and stopped at a distance where seeing me would be a choice. He saw me. "I'll go to the sacristy," I said, "as you suggested." The sacristy smelled of cloth and time. He laid his chasuble over a chair with careful fingers. Lucas lingered near a corner, studying his shoes. I set my folder on the table, not waving it but laying it in front of reality. "I wrote," I said. "I documented. I asked for help, not to attack you, so we don't have to keep meeting only at the point of refusal. I'm not your enemy. I'm a hungry daughter." Saying hungry made me feel 6 years old. "You need to trust," he answered. "Trust is a beautiful word that breaks easily when empty." "Trust isn't blind obedience," I said. "It's when the shepherd says, 'I see you,' not 'I hide you.' Do you see me?" I hadn't planned that question. It slipped through a crack in the silence and landed there between us like a small, insistent bird. He hesitated. "If I'm generous, I'd say I saw tiredness." "I see the community," he said at last. "And me?" I asked without raising my voice. "I'm part of it." He dropped his eyes for a heartbeat, short, but I kept it like a pebble in my pocket. For one blink, someone in the room understood the question. Lucas spoke then, with a quiet courage I hadn't seen in him. "Father, the diocese will be involved. For everyone's good, let's suspend any public references. No captions, no photos, no illusions, until we've truly listened together. As for communion, we can discern, yes, but the altar can't be a place for memos. Father looked at him stern. Are you correcting me, Lucas? I'm asking that the medicine not become a wound, he replied. Father pressed his lips into a line. I stand by what I said. For now, no. I felt the ground shift again. My body wanted to do every human thing at once. Cry, shout, laugh in disbelief, and my mouth did the only thing it could. I'll keep coming, I said. I won't argue in the communion line, but I won't let my body be a chalkboard either. I'll go as far as needed so prudence stops being a cloak for hurting. He nodded in a way that could mean do what you want. I chose to hear I heard you. Outside, the courtyard hummed with small lives, children racing, people negotiating lunch, the human noise of an ordinary Sunday. It's astonishing how the world continues, while your world sits on a bench catching its breath. Donna Teresa wrapped me in her arms like she'd learned how to protect beyond skin. You were dignified, she said. I almost answered thank you for seeing me, but only sighed. A young couple approached shyly. We admire your courage, they said. It's not courage, I answered. It's necessity. At the gate, a catechist called my name. I braced for a tidy sermon. Her eyes were wet. I have a tiny tattoo on my ankle, she admitted, from when my brother died. I've been hiding it under thick tights since I joined catechesis. Today, thank you for standing. I didn't know what to do with a secret that slips through without a sound. I held her hand for a second that held a world. At home, I sat on the living room floor again. Bento came for his ritual, rubbing my arm, purring what cats know how to say there's still life here. I cried, not a flood, but a steady rain that rinses the dust after a storm. Then I opened the window, let in the sun, filed the papers, and stuck a note on the fridge with a swallow-shaped magnet. Next Sunday, I return. I needed visible proof that I wasn't just a humiliated story, I was a person in motion. On Monday, the courier wrote back again. We will schedule a listening session with the parish and the faithful concerned. Listening. The word shone like a small found stone. I snapped a photo of the email and sent it to Lucas. Thank you for not leaving me alone in that corridor, I wrote. He replied with the sentence that disarmed me and braced me at once. I needed not to leave myself alone either. The week trotted forward with its ordinary noises, printer grinding, bus coughing at the corner, the tamale seller singing off-key. Between noises, I rehearsed what I'd say if asked to speak, not to win a debate, but to ask not to be hurt without hurting back. Sometimes his phrase cut through me again. Not now. I answered it with my own. I am a daughter. I am someone. I am not a poster. On Saturday, someone knocked. A man in a light suit, leather briefcase, attentive eyes stood on my stoop. Paolo, he said, from the diocesan council. Every muscle in my body woke up. May I come in? I'm here to listen. 2 words, said Wright. Don't hurt. I told him everything, not in a rush, with pauses. Sometimes I looked at his eyes, sometimes at my hands. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, we need to heal without display, correct without humiliation. Thank you for staying. I didn't know what his visit promised. For the first time in weeks, the tightrope swayed a little less. Sunday came again. Same blouse, same small, stubborn certainty. Third pew. When the communion line rose like a wave, my legs obeyed the way legs obey what they learned long ago. I stood, and the aisle looked wider. Maybe because I wasn't alone inside myself anymore. 2 people ahead of me, I glimpsed Paolo at the back, discreet as a shadow, present but not intrusive. Father saw me too. His face wasn't war, it was wall. My turn. I extended my hands. He drew breath, and I knew before the words landed that the answer was again, not now. But before he finished the sentence, and before I could say why, a man's voice from the assembly, firm and even, rose like a line laid down for us to stand on. Father, by charity, receive. It wasn't a shout. It was a grown man's plea. The entire church turned, heads moving together like a field of sunflowers. I didn't speak, neither did he. There was only air between his hand and mine, and the weight of everything that had been said and done. In that one long second, something in our machinery broke. Not victory, not defeat, just the end of that way of continuing. I stepped back by my own choice, not expelled, and knelt. I won't shout, I told my bones. I will remain. I knew the story hadn't ended. Something larger than our lines had begun. Maybe listening, maybe true correction, maybe the simple truth that you don't swallow a daughter whole to protect an altar. After Mass, I waited again until the last footfall dissolved into the stone. In the courtyard, Paolo approached. "Let's all meet this week at the Curia," he said plainly. I nodded. "Thank you for coming." He smiled without promising more than presence, and that Sunday, presence was exactly what saved me. I walked home with warm wind on my face. The sky had traded its pencil blue for a gentle grey. I made tea, sat down, and opened my notebook. Today I did not disappear. Tomorrow may no one have to appear like this just to be seen. I closed it and rested my forehead on the cool window glass. I didn't know the ending. Public apology, a change of posture, the bishop's voice, whether the already deleted photo would smoulder back to life. I only knew we had left the narrow hallway of Not Now and stepped into a room where listening had a chair. Next Sunday, whatever happened, I would be there. Not out of stubbornness, but out of fidelity to the person I've become while they try to bend me. Someone who isn't a poster, someone who's hungry, someone learning to conjugate courage in the present tense. The week opened with a brief, unadorned summons. Meeting at the Curia, Wednesday 3 p.m. Participants, Episcopal Vicar Paolo, Parish Pastor, representative of the Communications Ministry, Extraordinary Minister Lucas, and the faithful. No adjectives, no promises, just chairs with names. On Wednesday, the afternoon light cut rectangles across a long old hallway. Inside, a modest room, a plain table, a glass pitcher, 4 cups, a small crucifix on the wall. Paolo began without ceremony. Low voice, high attention. "We're here to hear the hurt, understand decisions, and make sure care doesn't become a wound." She spoke first. Not to accuse, but to line up the facts the way you gather shards to prove the vase really broke. She described the refusal in the communion line, the unauthorized photo, the caption framed as catechesis, the whispers, the bulletin illustration tracing her humiliation, the suggestion of private communion, the 2 public "not now" on successive Sundays. Her voice didn't rise, memory did. Lucas sat with a notebook, eyes down, posture saying, "I am here." When the pastor spoke, he opened with a sigh. No homiletic cadence here, no pulpit. He said, "Prudence, scandal, parents alarmed, youth needing clarity, the burden of protecting the flock." There was truth in his fear, poorly translated by his actions. "I wanted to protect," he concluded. The sentence hung like laundry waiting for wind. Paolo didn't answer right away. He first asked the communications lead to explain the post. Eyes lowered, she admitted the formational intent and lack of explicit consent. "We thought the angle, backs only, wouldn't identify anyone." She acknowledged that the caption crossed the line from care to exposure. "We didn't measure the wound." It was the first "we were wrong" spoken by someone who wasn't the victim. Then Paolo set his pen down and spoke with the cadence of a man who's tied more than one knot in a frayed cord. "The Church has a grammar of mercy and, yes, norms. Those norms do not authorize refusing communion over external appearance except in very specific and public cases of obstinate grave sin, which has not been alleged here. And pastoral charity is never exercised by humiliating someone before the assembly. When correction is truly needed, it happens face to face, with real listening, without turning a person into a poster." No one answered for a moment. The weight in the room moved to a new corner. The pastor's shoulders dropped a fraction, enough to let humanity through. "If I wounded you, I ask forgiveness," he said. It wasn't scripted. The words came with grit. I felt pressured. I went too far. Without triumph, Paolo proposed roads you can walk on, because pain needs pavement, and 1. A public apology for the exposure and the public refusals. 2. Permanent removal of any material, photo, drawing, bulletin, that uses parishioners as examples without consent. 3. Specific formation for the communications and catechetical teams on images, dignity and consent. 4. Pastoral accompaniment for anyone who desires it, without conditioning access to the Eucharist on appearance. 5. Internal guardrails, so the altar is never used for announcements or scoldings. He looked at her. "Would you like to say anything when the apology is offered?" she breathed, and answered with the serenity of someone who's weighed every word. "If I speak, let it be brief. I don't want the liturgy to become a stage for my wound. I only want to make sure no one has to appear like this to be seen." The date was set. Sunday, 10 a.m. Word spread. Some feared a scene, others exhaled in relief, like people who finally find an umbrella with rain in the forecast. The request for discretion traveled faster than discretion itself. On Sunday, the church was full but quieter, as if respect could be a sound. Lucas checked the paten twice, not counting the hosts so much as giving his hands a task. Donna Teresa took her usual place with a handkerchief tucked away, just in case. She arrived early and sat in her third pew spot, the simple gesture saying, "I belong here." Blue from the stained glass fell across the aisle like a small river. In the homily, Father didn't hide behind verses. He spoke about reconciliation without turning the altar into a court. He admitted zeal can confuse itself with haste, and that public correction becomes punishment when it refuses someone's story. Just before communion, he asked for the microphone again, not to explain, but to own. He held a paper and barely looked at it. "I spoke thinking I was protecting. I refused wanting to correct. I exposed where I should have cared. I ask forgiveness of this community, and especially of the person I hurt." He did not say her name. Not naming her was part of the care. He announced the trainings, the policy changes, the commitment not to use people as illustrated catechesis. Quiet tears appeared in the pews, not performance, repair. Watching an adult ask forgiveness in public stitches, fibers that reason alone can't reach. The music began soft, lines formed. She rose without hurry, the measured pace of someone relearning how to walk. Eyes met hers along the aisle, but they didn't feel like lamps anymore. They felt like hands extended from inside. When she reached the front, the priest met her gaze. Both knew that the tiny gesture about to happen carried the weight of a halted landslide. He raised the host. "The body of Christ," she answered, "Amen," and the amen tied together two edges that never needed to be cut. She received. She returned to her place. No collapse, just the small smile of a person holding her own face together after an earthquake. In the courtyard afterward, the air smelled like warm bread and clean conversation. People approached with short phrases, the kind that don't ask the wounded to carry a seminar. "I'm sorry I stayed silent. Thank you for not leaving. My son wants his grandmother's name as a tattoo. I used to fear what people would say. Today, I feared more not being just." One of the teens from before, now a shade taller, said shyly, "I learned something. Sometimes sin starts when we treat people like traffic signs." She smiled with her eyes and corrected gently, "Sometimes it starts when we stop listening." Monday, the parish published a concise notice, "Commitment to the dignity of all," an image use policy requiring explicit consent, a promise not to use identifiable people as examples without permission, and a reminder that pastoral correction is never done through public exposure. It wasn't triumph, coarse correction. The next Sunday's bulletin offered a catechesis titled "What We Bring to the Altar, Conscience, Reconciliation, Mercy," and not a line about marked skin. The drawing that had turned a wound into a stencil did not reappear. Midweek, she and Lucas met almost by accident in the courtyard. He held his notebook, she hers. They traded gratitude without drama. "Thank you for saying, 'Let correction not be humiliation,' that day," she told him. "I said it for me, too," he replied. "That for me showed another layer. His faith had grown alongside hers. Life didn't become a tidy series finale. Some parishioners stayed wary. A few murmured, 'So now anything goes.' Others kept a courteous distance while they figured out what changed and what didn't. Yet something in the center shifted. The community lost the habit of using people as handouts and gained the habit of asking before posting. In the pastoral council, a couple of parents apologized for pressure applied in hallways. Others quietly brought their teens to talk with her, not to learn the tattoo lesson, but to hear about quiet courage. From her corner of the pews, Donna Teresa summed it up. "Reverence looks better when it's stitched to respect." And the priest, he didn't come out smaller. He came out real. He kept caring for his people, but put public correction back where it belongs, outside the communion line. He sought formation. He gave the communications team room to learn new practices. He opened, late, but he opened, his office to wounds without ink that hurt just the same. Months later, in an adult catechesis, he risked a sentence that would have saved them all had it come earlier. "The sacrament isn't a prize for the clean. It's bread for the journey." No applause followed. Good. Some sentences ask not for hands, but for life. She didn't become a symbol. She became someone people knew. Invitations to speak arrived. She accepted when they felt like pathways, not shop windows. She shared 2 lessons shaped by time and tenderness. First, forgiveness is not an eraser. It's a bridge that lets the wounded cross without carrying the whole bridge on their back. Second, dignity isn't always a shout. Often it's a stubborn staying. At home, she kept to the small things that hold the world. Work, visit her aunt, bake cakes, feed bento, water the plants. Faith, she learned, is also made of the chores nobody posts. One afternoon, she opened her notebook on the concrete bench beneath the mango tree and wrote a letter to no one in particular, a letter to the future. If one day you want to quit because someone says, "Not now," remember, an altar's word cannot be final when it wounds. Remember the hands that touched your shoulder. Remember the silence that watched. Remember you are not a poster. She closed the notebook and let the wind play with her marked arms. The drawings remained memories. They also became scars that remembered a choice to stand. In the parish, small signs pointed to a large change. The communications team began using written consent forms for any image where someone could be recognized, not out of lawsuit fear, but from learned respect. The pastoral council added a brief time for listening to parishioners in dedicated meetings, not to turn everything into a town hall, but to keep human stories from becoming footnotes. The teens painted a banner for the parish festival. "Here, we care without exposing." Naive, maybe, but responsibility often sprouts in those kinds of gardens. At the 1 year later Mass, almost nothing looked different. The blue window, the creaking wood, the familiar fan hum, and yet everything had changed. Communion unfolded with no sound beyond the rite. When she approached the altar, no one held a breath. The assembly had unlearned its habit of turning her steps into a referendum. The body of Christ. Amen. This time, the Amen didn't stitch anything. It merely confirmed. On the way back, she caught the eye of one of the teens from a year ago, taller now, with a discreet name inked at his wrist. He smiled like someone saying, "I understood." She returned the smile. "Me too." The storyteller could be tempted to end with a neat proverb. Stories like this refuse tight frames. From a step back, you see a community that unlearned a bad habit and learned a better one. You see a priest who stopped being wall long enough to be door. You see a woman who never wanted a stage, and without trying, set a step where others can cross with less fear. You see, most of all, an altar restored to its proper place. Not a bulletin board, a table of bread. People ask the predictable question, did she forgive? Maybe the more fertile question is, did we learn? Forgiveness, she'd say if she were closing this, releases the wounded to live beyond the wound. Learning keeps other people from being wounded the same way. A community that asks forgiveness and changes practices is worth more than a community that never errs, because it never risks love. Faith isn't small. Sometimes we are. But we grow when we say we're sorry for real and set the house in order. And you, who walked with her to the end, what would you have done? Would you have come back the next Sunday? If you were the priest, would you have the courage to apologize publicly? Would you, like Lucas, risk saying out loud that correction must not humiliate? Whose shoulder would you touch, like Donna Teresa's? And if you ran a ministry, would you publish faces without consent? Comment: justice or abuse? Would you have forgiven? Confronted? What counts as just repair here? Public apology? Formation, policy change, all of the above?